Welcome to DNF. This is an F1 podcast, but I want you to know that I am Spencer Hall, and that is Jessica Smetana. That is Jessica Smetana. And we are going to discuss a film that is, I think, more relevant to F1 than you think, and culturally so important, it merits its own episode. Jessica, what are we going to discuss today?
We are going to discuss the cinematic masterpiece that is the 2006 Pixar film, Cars.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Fireworks effects.
That's
Thanks,
right.
Doug.
Life is a highway, and we're going to drive it all night long today in discussing the film Cars, which I think we have found is more popular among every single subsect and little, like, concentric circle overlapping diagram, Venn diagram of automotive culture, everything. There are F1 personnel who have Cars tattoos. I have heard said on the grid the word ka-chow by multiple F1 drivers.
What?
Yes. I know. I believe I've
George
heard.
Russell said that, right?
Yes, I'm sure
Yeah.
he has, because it would be the corniest possible thing for him to do. So he did it, and that's why we love him.
And you know what? I didn't know that came from Cars because I've never seen Cars before. And in fact, I don't think I've seen like I would say I haven't seen at least like 90% of Pixar movies. I've seen like 4 Pixar movies in my life.
Yeah.
They were not like a thing that my family ever watched when I was growing up. We watched like The Twilight Zone because I had a crazy nanny that could see ghosts. So I didn't get to watch a lot of Pixar as a child. And so now I'm revisiting this movie that came out when I was in like 5th grade. And I'm like, wow, that would have been more age appropriate. Why didn't anyone show me Cars?
instead of a scary thing about a cannibal cookbook made by aliens. Yes.
The one with the ceiling fan still fucks me up, Spencer. I still don't like ceiling fans over my bed, but that is a therapy session for another day.
That's right.
Where do we begin with this Cars conversation?
Well, I think it would be very important to begin with the Cars conversation to say this. It is a movie about NASCAR, but it is in general about racing, and it is specifically about Lightning McQueen, who is a young, arrogant racer who finds his comeuppance in the form of being stranded in a small town where he learns all of the lessons of life. Does this sound a lot like the plot to the movie Doc Hollywood starring Michael J. Fox? If you've seen it, yes, but it's a cartoon and it's a race car instead of Michael J. Fox and a doctor. So never mind. Let Hollywood settle that out. He learns a lot of lessons from Radiator Springs. He goes on, becomes a better racer, and manages to overcome his rival Chick Hicks in the last race using the wisdom of Paul Newman. Of all people, by the way, this is Paul Newman's last role.
It is. And also I read George Carlin who is a voice in this film, passed away right before it came out. So it's one of his last credits also. Yep. So this movie has a lot of trivia attached to it. And as we'll mention later, some actual drivers make cameo appearances in this. Their voices do, at least. And I guess their cars, the likeness of themselves in the cars. See, Spencer, this is one thing that I have a lot of questions with, and we can get to this later on if you want when we discuss like the real meat of the film. Are the cars themselves anthropomorphic cars, or are there like humanoid people inside the cars that control the movement and the thought of the cars?
Full anthropomorphic cars. That's
okay.
That's
because like they have tongues and teeth. And implicitly other human body parts inside of them. And if not, what's inside of the passenger part of the car? Do they just have empty seats? Which then implies who would sit in those seats if there were not humans in this world? Why would they exist? One
of the many alternate history questions involving this movie is whether the cars have killed humans, overthrown us, and taken the country as their own. And I believe that is the assertion here. I'm going to stand by it because there is human infrastructure, but only cars inhabit it. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure we're done. Like, the humans are dead in this one.
That feels right. That feels like that could potentially be the future that we're hurtling towards.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, Spencer, I did something to kind of refresh everyone on the plot of Cars. I wrote an F1 Minute about Cars.
Oh, Jess, do you have an F1 Minute for us?
Yeah, I do. So, Doug, hit the music. It's lights out and away we go at the Dynaco 400, where Strip, the King Weathers, Chick Hicks, and the rookie Lightning McQueen are competing for the famed Piston Cup. Chick makes a dangerous move and causes a massive collision with just laps to go in the race, but McQueen navigates the wreckage and stays on the track for the win. But oh no, he's blown both tires in the last lap. It's a photo finish at the line, and it's a three-way tie. It'll be a race-off for the win at LA International Speedway in 1 week. McQueen is en route to LA when he falls off his transport truck and is stranded alone in the deserted Radiator Springs. After destroying the town's main road, he meets the town's prosecutorial team. Doc Hudson, played by salad dressing mogul Paul Newman, and Sally, a Porsche, and the immediate object of his lust. His defense attorney Mater is Larry the cable guy, and allows McQueen to be sentenced to community service / hard labor. He must repair the road before he can leave Radiator Springs. Despite initially despising his captors, McQueen finds redemption by realizing their mutual carmanity in discovering Radiator Springs was once a booming stop along Route 66 before the federal government constructed an interstate highway system in the post-World War II economic expansion of America, thus destroying the town. In a horrible twist of irony, the car universe's dependence on cars has destroyed the very fiber of their community. McQueen repairs the road, finds love and friendship among the town's cars, including 2 offensively stereotypical Italian cars, and eventually makes it to LA, where his new friends join his pit team and help him lead the race. Back on the track, that asshole Chick purposely damages King and leaves him for dead. McQueen, realizing his friend Doc pushes the retiring superstar car across the finish line, McQueen loses the race but returns to Radiator Springs and helps revitalize the town.
Bravo. Brava, should I say. Yes, fantastic work. I will also point out that Cheech Marin, his character is a lowrider, if you just want to know how hard we're steering in to certain stereotypes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing about that, like, are you good at recognizing famous people's voices? Because I realized I'm not during this.
Yeah. Did you miss a couple? Did you miss that
all of them?
Luigi is played by Tony Shalhoub?
Yeah, I would have not known that. Lightning McQueen, I realized was Owen Wilson after I Googled Cars cast IMDb, and he was listed as Lightning. Like, I should have known that was Owen Wilson. We do Owen Wilson voices all the time on the Le Batard Show.
Did you look up who the King was?
The King?
Yeah, Strip Weathers. Did you?
It was don't tell me. I did look it up. Who was it? I forgot.
It's Richard Petty. Right.
Yeah. That's right. Yes.
It's actually the King of NASCAR. Yeah.
Right. Which I mean, there's a 0% chance that like people sitting in a theater would be like, oh yeah. I mean, maybe not 0, but not 100.
Yeah. My favorite, there are a lot of people in here who are actual sort of racing type people. Richard Petty is in here. Darrell Waltrip plays Darrell Cartrip. In here,
Bob Costas, of course.
Yes, who is Bob Cutlass in this? Jay Leno is in it as Jay Limo. Jr. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is in this film as well. Humpy Wheeler, of all people, by the way, Humpy Wheeler plays Tex, the head and founder of Dynaco. Humpy Wheeler's like big NASCAR guy, owns a track. And his name is Humpy Wheeler, so of course,
unforgettable.
He has the most racing name ever, right? A few observations. First of all, the people who made this absolutely love racing. 100% love racing. Went insane for it. Evidently, the main Pixar guys fell in love with this concept because they went to Sonoma. So they went out to Sonoma and they watched the race there, and they said, "Hey, got an idea," and that's sort of where like the like germ origin for this entire thing happened. Additionally, there's a lot of love in terms of some of the details. For instance, yes, Richard Petty is driving a Bluebird, that car that he flips, right? Like his car, that the King Strip Weathers he is in Richard Petty's most sort of iconic car that is not like maybe the late model STP car. So he is in that car. It's a little homage to Petty. There's all sorts of little like NASCAR references here, but there's larger than that. For instance, Luigi and Guido. Luigi and Guido are pretty much our F1 partisans here in the cast. They own a tire shop in Radiator Springs that nobody goes to. They're the ones who, when asked about NASCAR, say, "I only know about the Ferraris." They are not only, yes, the extremely Italian stereotype in both cases, they are 100% Ferrari fan stereotypes. Like, in for a penny, in for a pound. We only care about the red. That is 100% what they are, which is hilarious, if yes, perhaps a little offensive to Jessica.
Yeah, to us Italian Americans, third
Mhm.
generation. I do have a couple random notes here and there. One of them, Spencer, I know you have children and you probably
Mhm.
already had a Disney Plus subscription prior to this.
That is why I am deeply familiar with this film. Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I
Mhm.
downloaded Disney Plus just to watch this and found out that Disney Plus shows ads in the middle of movies.
Mhm.
That's an abomination. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I'm sure most people pay for like the premium ad-free version, but man, I saw some like children's Top Golf like Sesame Street Muppet thing like 50 times in the middle of
Mhm.
the movie, and I made that made me sad for all the parents that watch Pixar movies with their kids on Disney Plus and have to see like 17 different ad breaks in the middle of
It's always kind of a prison. I think most people pay for premium simply so they won't have to watch that, because you're going to be watching,
it.
you might be watching this movie 20, 30, 40 times.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I weirdly made my parents watch the Santa Claus a lot with
Mhm.
me when I was a kid, so I guess that would be the equivalent would be if there were a ton of ads in the middle of the Santa Claus. But Top Golf didn't exist back then, so that's
Yeah.
probably good.
Weirdly, strange urge to go to Topgolf later today.
Yeah, I
Just
wonder
just
why. That just
overcoming
came out
me.
of nowhere. But I mean, to your point, like the amount of detail, not just within the very specific Cars universe with different sort of like homages to NASCAR
Mhm.
and to different like just tiny little minuscule details, but just like the detail of the animations themselves, I loved. And I loved the you said this was inspired by a road trip that the creators took
Mhm.
out in the West. Like you can see how much they really wanted to show like the expansive, beautiful geography of the American West in their own little animated world. And I really did like that. Like it's weird to watch a cartoon movie and be like, wow, what a beautiful shot. But Pixar, man, they pay great attention to detail. So, you know, for being like 30 and seeing this for the first time, a lot to appreciate.
A lot to appreciate. A soundtrack that features some really weird choice, like Sheryl Crow's the opening song. Like the Rascal Flatts version of "Life Is a Highway"
Yeah.
is in this as well. Um, yeah, there's a lot of really wild shit in this. There's a John Mayer version of Route 66 that closes this out. It is modeled in large part, yes, on Route 66 and on a lot of the towns along there. And there are a couple of towns, by the way, that have like cars themed roadside attractions, just as part of, just to let you know that, hey, that was us. Um, what were the things that struck you when you go, okay, I have so many questions about X?
I mean, honestly, I think it just made me realize how F1 centric my view of motorsports in general
Mm-hmm.
is or are. But I think the first thing that struck me right off the bat was like the opening crash sequence in the race that that the movie opens with.
Mm-hmm.
Like I imagine that children watching it would probably be like, "Whoa, what the actual fuck is
Mm-hmm.
that about?" And
Yeah.
this movie just goes like full into it. And I wondered if there was any sort of conversation between the creators of Cars and like any sort of NASCAR representatives about like showing the actual like carnage of a wreck in a NASCAR race. Obviously, all the cars in Cars drive off and they're fine, but it was kind of shocking to see that within the first few scenes of the movie.
It is shocking to see that, and it is also shocking that NASCAR said, "No, we just want the kids to see that and go, cool."
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's my point about like being an F1 fan, because like that is not a part of F1, or at least
No.
like they don't want it to be a part of F1, and it's very frowned upon unless you're like Max Verstappen. I'm just kidding. I just see if people are, paying
Yeah.
attention and angry tweet at us.
Yeah.
But like it being like the primary driver, no pun intended, of this plot. Yeah, it's like cool. Wow, that was crazy. Look at this crazy way, like crazy move that Lightning McQueen
Mm-hmm.
does.
Being Martin Brundle basically is what you want to avoid. Martin Brundle, who said, really, we need more sort of like, dashing, daring knight riding on the edge of death. We need more of that in the sport. And you go, hey, ho, 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 Martin. No,
Yeah.
consult the PR guide.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I don't know. I mean, it opened up a whole new world for me of different kinds of cars. And, I enjoyed that.
You should know, because you are new to this universe,
Mhm.
Cars 2 explores that. Cars 2, a very controversial film, as we'll talk about, but Cars 2 explores that. You get a different variety of racing. This is primarily just, yes, NASCAR, but Lightning McQueen, thanks to Owen Wilson's character work and the outstanding animation of everyone at Pixar, became kind of an iconic figure for a lot of race car drivers, particularly the catchphrase "Ka-chow." I think also maybe industry-wide identifying with the bad ad reads. Bad ad reads are not only a part of every podcaster's life, they're a part of Lightning McQueen's life because he very unenthusiastically reads his Rusty's ads. Like extremely unenthusiastically. Yes. Unlike you, who absolutely nails every one of their ads.
I did my Rusty's ad read enthusiastically because guess what? They're sending us something for that.
Yeah.
Not.
And you get to say "Ka-chow."
It is fascinating to me how I like avoided watching this for so long, given how influential it is in the world of motorsports and also just like to regular people that have seen it. Not that motorsport people aren't regular, but you know what I mean. There is a Cars attraction coming to Magic Kingdom this year, which feels like weird given the movie came out like 20 years ago, but maybe that's a normal thing that they wait to see what's culturally resonant until they build a huge thing out of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Spencer, maybe that'll be a future episode of DNF. We can go to Orlando and ride the Cars thing.
Episode 348. We ride the Cars ride, right?
The Cars ride. Yep. That's what that's called.
It's also funny to me because when you talk to drivers and when you talk to pit people and when you talk to anyone in the sport, this is the movie that comes up, I think, most affectionately. If there's the intersection of those two lines, that's where they come together. I know that Brad Pitt is making an F1 movie. I know that there's Rush. There's an entire series of films. There's Le Mans with Steve McQueen. There were all of these films, and none of them get name checked as much as the goddamn kids movie. None of them. That's the one that racers most often cite and joke about, other than I think on a 1-2. And again, for some reason NASCAR does it better than anyone else. Talladega Nights. Like those are the two, and that may be an age thing because everyone's of the sort of like right demographic to have seen both, but still I laugh every time this movie comes up around drivers and engineers and pit people because they've all seen it and they all have a favorite.
It's funny you mentioned Talladega Nights because I think it came out the same year as Cars, and yet had like only like less than half of the box office money that they made off of it versus Cars, which made like $500 million. And like Rush doesn't even come close to that either. Obviously it came out like 10 years after Cars, but still like it's the Pixar movies are they go places, man. People watch that, and I feel like I've been missing out.
Do you have any other random thoughts before we go to an actual Cars expert about the movie Cars?
How do they reproduce? Because again, if this is a world where there were once humans and the humans created the cars, then there's only a finite number of cars. And then I guess my other question would be like, they presumably die because there are cars in the universe that need various maintenance at certain points to keep going. So you have to assume, do we see any cars die in the movie? I don't think we did.
We don't. Cars can die because cars do die in part 2. So cars are not so cars are not immortal.
But no cars born? Is that Cars 3?
No, but there are car children in the stands. So there's little cars in the stands. So they must be able to reproduce, which means that and I will tell you that there are some scientists who've already beaten us to this by many, many years. If you just search Rule 34 Cars Lightning McQueen Sally, you'll find the most disturbing things you've ever seen on the internet.
Oh God, no.
Yeah.
I mean, our producer did send me a 4chan link yesterday, which I told him I wasn't going to click on, but
I did. It's fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. You can click on it for me.
Okay.
It's just that like the human anatomy, like he has a tongue, and I also appreciated that Lightning McQueen's like doing this like homage to Michael Jordan in the opening scene, and I'm watching it in like 2024, and I'm like, wow, that's an old reference, but in 2006, not that old of a reference.
No.
So, but yet still landed. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it is also it is also funny to me that now, 18 years after it came out, it is still a really easy watch. Typically pacing changes, like I've even noticed, I started to watch Adult Swim with my kids. And if we'll watch an episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, which is 11 minutes.
What?
There were
Really?
still, there's like 11-minute episodes. Like they are short.
Why did I feel like that show was always on?
Because it was.
Yes, but I felt like it was all one episode.
Yeah, but it is. It's always the same thing. Shake wants something. He takes a shortcut and the universe dies because of what he wanted. So I watch it with them, and even there are bits in Adult Swim shows where I go, I know this is a little slow for him. It's a little slow. This does not do that. This is still lickety split, click, get in, get out, tells the entire story. Every single voice casting decision is nailed, right down to one of the last people in the movie, Michael Schumacher. Michael Schumacher making an appearance in Luigi and Guido's tire shop.
Yeah.
And they both pass out.
Which implies that they have some sort of blood pressure. There is some sort of...
It's a circulatory system, which, they are cars, right? Oil.
That's true.
Like, yeah.
It could be gasoline or perhaps oil.
It could be, yeah.
Fluid, but
what we're definitely saying, and what we know from the movie, they do get aroused.
Yeah. Lightning McQueen, very horny for Sally.
Very horny car.
Disturbingly so.
Yes.
Probably.
Extremely horny car. It's implied that they can abuse drugs because Fillmore exists. That's the van.
True.
Right. Also, I'm pretty sure Fillmore, by the way, Trump voter. I just get vibes.
He's one of those like people that lives in Arizona that has like a bunch of those like weird signs on the side of the road.
Right. A lot of bumper stickers.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I think Fillmore is alternately an environmentalist and also votes extremely conservative. I don't know how those two things work. He's like kind of got libertarian vibes. I think it's probably the way.
I get where you're going with it.
Right.
That's George Carlin's voice, right?
Right. That's George Carlin's voice.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think Fillmore is definitely the guy to do that.
I don't want the government to tell me to take a vaccine, like that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Like Fillmore gegets really problematic around 2020, 2021, right? Because if cars can have all these things, presumably they can have viruses, and Fillmore's not letting the government tell him what to put in his body. Dang it.
I don't know why I gave Fillmore that accent. He doesn't really have an accent.
He's got like the hippie. Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, like Bill Walton-esque.
Yes, he's definitely got a Bill Walton vibe to him.
Anyways, shall we talk to our guest?
I think we should. I think we've exhausted our expertise. We need to bring somebody who really knows what they're talking about.
We'll ask them if the cars fuck.
Because we're just people who watch racing, we thought we might bring on somebody who had some real technical expertise. Because when you're talking about Cars, the movie, you want to talk technical expertise. That's why we brought on Bozi Tatarevic. Did I get the name right?
Oh, that's perfect. That's I'm impressed.
Fantastic. Bozi, your own resume, you have a diverse resume when it comes to automotives, yes?
A little bit, yeah. I've done a few races here and there.
Yeah. Pit crew? Yep. Correct?
Yeah.
Commentator, podcaster, man of many talents. But first and foremost, I want to go ahead and just claim this spot on your resume. You are an expert on the movie Cars. Because when we asked you to come on, we received in our inboxes a dossier on notes on Cars. Like, I'm talking 624 words about Cars, which is absolutely amazing. When did you first watch this movie?
So I was actually late to the scene with the movie. So when it first came out, I was in college doing sports and just other kind of activities. So I figured it's like a cartoon. It's not really for me, as a 21-year-old guy just out, doing whatever. So I didn't watch it until 2021. So in 2021, I've talked to different racers and stuff. And there were different professional drivers, mechanics, even engineers that are like, you have to watch this movie. And one of the biggest proponents actually was Raja Karuth. So he's a NASCAR Truck Series driver right now. And at the time, I think he was racing ARCA, maybe some other stuff. But we were doing Twitter spaces, and it was kind of a running joke back and forth because he would make Cars references. And whenever he would do that, I would just kind of like stare and just try to figure out what's going on. And then he would tell me that he was 4 years old when he watched Cars and make me feel old. And we went back and forth. And eventually in the summer of 2021, I was on a long flight to California. I was like, I'll have to watch this.
Yeah. And when you did, and I will stop talking at this point, I promise. But when you watched it, before you did, how many drivers have watched this movie? Like all of them? Do all of the drivers at least have like a familiarity with the movie Cars? Like adults who might otherwise not?
I think the vast majority of racing drivers that I've met and worked with do. So as an example, the guys that I work with on the Lexus RCF GT3 and IMSA, so people like Jack Hawksworth, Ben Barnicoat, and even Kyle Kirkwood, who also races an IndyCar, we were at a dinner at the Detroit GP like a couple of months ago, and that was like a 20-minute dinner conversation comparing Cars 1 and Cars 2 and whether Cars 2 stands up and is, one that should be considered at the level of Cars 1 and Cars 3. And it was like a whole thing into it. And these are guys that have won all over the world in multiple different racing series, have raced in IMSA, IndyCar, NASCAR, WEC, like all this other stuff. And this is what our dinner conversation is like. And people that were walking outside of the steakhouse watching drivers and mechanics sitting here probably thought we were talking about strategy or engineering or whatever else. No, it was cars.
Wait, so what's the consensus? Does Cars 2 hold up? Do we have to watch Cars 2 now?
You're probably going to have to watch it because that's like the controversial one. Cars 2, it's very controversial. And at our table that evening, there was a bunch of us, and it was split about 50-50 of people that are like Cars 2 is as equally good as, Cars 1 and 3, where the rest were like Cars 2 it shouldn't be respected as such. So you'll have to watch that as a follow-up to decide what side you stand on.
Yeah, highly controversial, Jess. Good because it's multidisciplinary and there's other forms of racing represented, and bad because of a lot of other things. So, but again, I think that's a whole separate podcast that we can get to.
Okay, we won't get into Cars 2, but I do need to ask because Cars 1 came out in 2006, so it's been almost 20 years since the first movie came out. Are there any drivers that you've met that were like inspired to become race car drivers because of Cars?
The big proponent that partly got me to watch the movie Raja that I just mentioned. So he was inspired by Lightning McQueen. He had Lightning McQueen toys, and like he grew up around the Washington D.C. area, and like there's not a whole lot of racing directly there. But he's like, how can I attach to this as I grew up? And then he ended up as a teenager getting into iRacing, and eventually made his way into some of the support series in NASCAR. And then this year he entered. Last year he entered the NASCAR Truck Series full time, but he's now a NASCAR Truck Series winner, and he's going to start his first playoff run in the Truck Series, I think, in a couple of weeks. So it's pretty neat to see like that whole development cycle.
I'm going somewhere with this based on your notes. This is predominantly a Formula One podcast, and you say, well, why is a movie about NASCAR relevant here? You've given me one big brick of an answer, because this movie is an inspiration to people beyond NASCAR and into Formula One. And one piece of evidence is that is an actual piece of human flesh, like an actual piece of someone's skin, because there is an F1 mechanic who has a tattoo of Luigi the Mechanic, correct?
That
Lightning
is correct.
McQueen's mechanic.
So Alessandro Fusaro is the number one mechanic for Charles Leclerc. And he is like, what in the US is like the equivalent of the car chief. So he's like the main mechanic basically. And on the inside of his, I think it's his left bicep, he's got I think it's Guido that is tattooed on there, and but with a red paint job, to match Ferrari, of course. So he became insanely popular online because of that, and the popularity grew. People found him partly because of the tattoo, but then with the way F1 fandom works, people kind of clung on to him and started basically making these like kind of like thirsty videos of him just like doing stuff around the car.
Oh,
so
God.
they would like put these like, like this music behind it, and everybody would be like, oh my God, who is he? I need to know more about him.
How would you like to ride home on a real cowboy? I got a 6-pack of cold ones all night, so my room is out all night, so you can scream my name as loud as you need to, sugar.
Hey, sexy lady, I like your flow, your body's...
And he's just this guy. He's married. He has a kid. He's just a mechanic. But because like people built this whole persona around him, like they started following him. And if you go on TikTok and type in Ferrari mechanic, Alessandro, you will see numerous videos about him. And he eventually had to like lock down his social media because people were sending him DMs and, leaving comments and all.
That doesn't sound
this
like
stuff.
TikTok at all.
Yeah, not at all.
No.
Yeah. But that's like how far it's grown. And it's, it's like there's the connection there. But that's the thing is like I have friends that work in all kinds of racing series across the world, where there's stuff like here, with NASCAR or IMSA or IndyCar, or across the world in F1. And there's always stuff like that connects us. And it's fascinating for me just to see the similarities in talking about cars and how relevant it is to actual professional racing, is that we're all somewhat similar and end up kind of with the same ideas, and we can all connect on that. And for me personally, once I saw Cars, like I actually had like a real world connection, because I'm an immigrant that came to the US and ended up, doing pit stops on a car of, because people would take a chance on me. And that's, just like in the movies with Luigi and Guido, they are immigrants that came to the US and somebody took a chance on them and they got to do pit stops in, one of the biggest races. So it's kind of cool to see that connection.
So the first Cars movie, there's cameos from Michael Schumacher and Mario Andretti, and I think there's probably other racers in there too that I'm forgetting right now. But has there been like a competition amongst drivers to like get make a cameo appearance in the Cars movies? Because then I saw that Lewis Hamilton was in the next Cars, which I haven't seen yet. So it's like, oh, Michael Schumacher did this, like now I've got to do it. Is that a thing?
I think there's probably some that are very much into it, and there's probably others that got it as part of their PR assignment for whatever week they have, or whoever they were contracted to at the time. So that's, I think the newer generation of drivers, so drivers that grew up, were in their formative years as Cars 1 and Cars 2 came out. Those drivers would happily, be in have a cameo in some sequel if it came out. But I think it was kind of half and half. And there are a lot of drivers that I know that are like down to do anything that's fun, that helps, spread their brand, and enjoy being part of little fun facts for things like that.
The little fun facts are my favorite part of the film. What are some things that when you watch the movie, you go, oh, they know what they're talking about, or they knew someone who knew what they were talking about when they made this film?
I mean, a lot of it's just the small details. Like, even though, the pit stops and things like that are comical, like one of the examples is, I think I'm trying to remember the truck's name, the Lightning McQueen's truck.
Mac.
Now it's Mac.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Mac, during one of the pit stop scenes at the race, is holding a fuel can. So typically in the late 90s and early 2000s, a lot of NASCAR teams would double stint their truck driver, where they would drive the truck to the track, and then they would also be the fueler during the races. This is previous to kind of the recent trend of full-on college athletes becoming crew members.
Right.
So it was neat to see little details like that, like Mac holding a fuel can when they show up to be the pit crew, for Lightning McQueen at the end of the race. And there's little details like that. And then even little nods on, the people that are in the movie. So one of my favorite things, I think, is like Luigi's license plate. It says 44.5-10.8. And that's actually a reference to the GPS coordinates for Maranello, which is where the Ferrari factory is located. So somebody, I definitely didn't notice that on my own, but, read it later on. But somebody was like, hey, let's put this reference here because they're talking about the Ferraris. And I think that one of the most interesting things from those conversations is that even though we're almost 20 years later, some of them have become relevant again as Formula One has become popular in the United States. So when Lightning McQueen shows up and, they say, oh, I only know the Ferraris because they only watch F1. That's something that I've experienced personally because I've been a crew member in IMSA and NASCAR, which are, racing series based in the US. And with the popularity of F1, when somebody asks me, what I do and I explain it to them, they're like, oh, I only know, McLaren or Ferrari in F1. How does that compare? So typically it opens up a conversation for me to explain, what I do. But I've seen now, even, almost 20 years later, that conversation has now ended up in a whole different circle because F1's become so popular.
Yeah, the scene that is funniest for me is when Luigi and Guido are full-on Ferrari pilled, when they have like the big hats and flags, and you go, oh, like the first time you see it, you go, that's cartoonish, and then you see the Tifosi and you go, nope, that's completely accurate, actually.
Yeah, no, it's really good, and they've done their work. And I was fortunate enough to eventually meet Jay Schuster, who's one of the character designers for the Cars movie, and he actually led some of the character design in the sequels. And the cool thing is, he's been a car fan and a racing fan. So when he was brought in to do that, it kind of brought even more legitimacy to what they were doing because he had that background knowledge. And I became friends with him and his girlfriend Renee over time, and they ended up coming to the Rolex 24. So that was kind of neat. They've been to the Rolex 24 a couple of years, and the most fun part for me, outside of just learning all this extra stuff about the Cars movies, is they bring me desserts. And as most people that follow me on social know, I'm all about the desserts. So like 15 hours into a 24-hour endurance race, I've done 14 or 15 pit stops, and we obviously have our snacks, and they bring us carbs and protein and all this other stuff that our nutritionist recommends. But then, they show up with donuts or crumble cookies, and I'm like, yes, this is what we need. So Jay and Renee are awesome people. And actually, back here behind me, if you look, this was something that Jay painted during
Oh, wow.
Rolex 24 weekends. So this is actually the Lexus RCF GT3 that I work on in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. And while at Rolex, I think last year, he sat there and painted it. And then when we won the championship at the end of the year, he sent it to me as like a kind of championship gift.
Is that Harrison Storm behind you over your left shoulder?
So that is
Jackson
so
Storm.
Jackson Storm.
Yeah.
So Jackson Storm is actually another gift from Jay and Renee. So Jay and Renee showed up. This was 2023. So they showed up. There was an event in Daytona prior to the Rolex 24 where I did some fan stuff. And they came out too, and we just chilled afterwards. This was before the race weekend, and they brought me this and a couple of other die casts from Pixar with some stuff that Jay had signed and filled out. So we did pretty well at the Rolex that year. I think it was our best result since I joined the program. I think we were third or fourth. But I was like, I'm not totally superstitious, but I'm gonna say I'm a little stitious. So I was like, this was with me when we had our good results. So I stuck it in my backpack. So this traveled with me last year in my backpack, the entire IMSA schedule, all the races, and it went all the way to Road Atlanta and Brazelton, Georgia for our final race and the championship race, and was in my backpack as I got ready for the championship banquet. So I'm just slightly superstitious. So this was cool to have, and it still travels with me because I'm a racer, and that's what we do.
That may be one of the few things that Cars didn't include was any sort of nod to the superstitious nature of a lot of drivers. At least not that I can recall from the story. But the whole plot hinges on like this dramatic three-way tie in the first act of Cars. Has something like that ever happened in any racing series before?
So, well, not necessarily a tie, but going back to how Cars is becoming relevant again, earlier this year at the NASCAR race at Atlanta, there was a 3-car run to the finish line. And they basically came across the finish line like equal, like they had to use high-speed cameras to figure out who was like 6 inches away from the other one to decide a winner. And that was the cool thing about the Cars fandom. And even some of the drivers in the series that, race in some of the supporting series, like seconds, I think, not even minutes after that finish, they were tweeting memes with the finish from Cars compared to the finish. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they were like, this middle car just needed a little tongue, to be able to make it across and not, lose by, 6 inches or 7 inches or whatever. So if you go back through, that's the cool thing about this movie being such a big part of the culture. I think it's also a big part of what's brought in some younger fans, because that's a big focus for most racing series, most sports in general, I think, professional sports leagues. So I think that's brought in some of them, and being able to make that connection will often bring in others that, may not necessarily watch NASCAR or whatever series is related to it.
Okay, series of relatively quick questions for you. There are no right answers to these. If you get them wrong, I will tell you. Question 1. Who is your favorite car in all of the Cars series?
I mean, it's gonna be Guido. So Guido does the pit stops, and I mean, he's my guy. Like me and my girlfriend were on vacation at Lake Tahoe a few weeks ago, and we stopped in Reno. There was a car museum, and they had a Cars display, and Guido, there was a stand-up of Guido, and I was like, I gotta get my picture with him. So that was like my main focus of the museum. So it's Guido. I mean, he's my guy.
Okay. 2. Do you think that there's effective pit strategy based on what you've seen in Cars, or could you improve on it? In other words, do you think you have something to give? Do you think Doc Hudson was maybe playing it a little loose and fast? Serious strategy question.
I mean, Guido, and whatever Luigi was doing, they were obviously helpful, but the other teams were using 4 crew members. So in my experience, if you can get a crew member on each corner, it's typically a little bit faster, even if you are able, to throw the tires in the air, which, I try not to do since the series frowns upon that. So I would say get some other people over the wall. I'm sure, there's other people in Radiator Springs that would be down to try it out.
Okay, good. So that's writing this note down. Could have more effective pit strategy and allocation of personnel in the pits. Fully agree.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean. Please go on. Please go on before I ask my stupid question.
No, I was going to say maybe, bring in some of the AI software we use now to, figure out when we need to pit. But
sure.
Yeah.
My stupid question was, what's your favorite dessert that keeps you well fed when you're in an endurance race or at work?
Pies are definitely my thing. I have a whole pie ranking. So, people that visit my social media will see, I think there's like 22, 23 pies that are ranked. So when we travel for races, I try to find bakeries and find pies or find, local delicacies. But during races, I think during endurance races, if we're doing like a 24-hour race, I try to space things out. And cookies are easier just to handle there because I have a bunch of gear on. So pie through a helmet doesn't typically work well. But cookies work. So as long as there's some sweets, we're good. And we expend enough energy during those races that I can have one of the big cookies. So yeah, but pie, apple pie, pecan pie are kind of the top of my list, and then it kind of goes down from there.
Can you give us maybe a top 5 pies?
My category.
Is apple number 1?
Yeah, apple's number 1, pecan's number 2, and then the rest kind of shift because there's a couple of pie shops locally that I frequent, and then some on the road. And then sometimes, if my girlfriend makes a pie, it just automatically goes up on the list just because she made it. So it shifts very often.
Did Chick Hicks do anything wrong?
I don't think so. So I'm a team player, and you should obviously help everyone when you can. But we go to the track to compete, and that's what I always say is, the other crew members on pit lane, we're all friends. We travel, the same schedule all year, so we see a lot of each other. So outside of the racetrack, if we go out to eat or go out to a bar or whatever else, we'll be friendly. We'll have a good time, but once that green flag drops, until the checkered has dropped, you got to go for it because we're there to win. We're not there to make friends during that time period.
I told you there were no right answers or wrong answers. That's the right answer. I don't think Chick Hicks did anything wrong.
His mistake was the mustache. I mean, it was not a good look.
Disagree.
Wasn't a
but
good
I
look.
would.
Well, personally, I had one race 2 years ago where I decided to shave this into a mustache. Did terrible, so never again.
See, there you go. There is a right answer.
Yeah.
Bozi, that was awesome. Hey, good luck with the rest of the season. Are you going to be at are you going to be at Petit Le Mans?
Absolutely. That's the plan. We got 3 more races. Hopefully trying to get the championship, but we'll see here in a few weeks.
All right. Holler at me because I'm
right.
semi-local. That is Bozi Tatarevic. You can follow him on Twitter, on all of your various socials, Instagram. He's a fabulous follow and also real good at race car and pit crew stuff. So, pay your boy.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely superb interview with Bozi. I think he is right about everything in this film. We do have to get him on to discuss Cars 2 at one point. I think that's a must because you need to watch Cars 2. Extremely touchy, controversial issue in the Cars community. The worth, quality, or importance of that film.
I think that I appreciate Cars more knowing how much real car people appreciate Cars. And there is still 1 week left of this dead period in F1. So maybe next week, Cars 2. Who's to say?
I think so. So we also have to do something else, which is this is a week where we do all kinds of stuff. One of them is the Lad of the Week. And we really don't have another choice in this, okay? I don't think we have anyone else we can pick other than Guido. Guido is the Lad of the Week.
What?
Nobody is more important to this film or to the outcome of this film than Guido, okay? First of all, Guido, first to show real hospitality to Lightning McQueen. He says, Guido says you have a slow leak. We fix it, right? He's the one who is mocked for his size in the movie Cars by other pit stop equipment and officials. He's the guy who goes in and makes the crucial pit decision, effectively bailing out Doc Hudson, who I don't think made the right call, especially in sending him out there by himself. Doesn't matter. All 4 tires, gas, and go. all off of Guido's back. Just an astonishing clutch bit of work by Guido. He is the lad of the week, Jessica.
Ferrari's F1 team should throw the bank at him. They need him so much.
So much. But listen, run everything. Guido, run everything. The Band-Aid you can apply to any racing team problem. He is the solution. Hey, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, by all means do so. Give us a positive review. Give us 5 stars. Don't give us 4 stars.
Yeah, let us know if there's any other movies you want us to review. I mean, we had a blast doing this, right, Spencer? I mean, more Pixar movies too.
Absolutely. But you're the
Toy
one who really gets to decide this, because I have seen it. My mind was already made up. Did you enjoy watching Cars?
I did.
Ka-chow.